In 1989, a country song about loss brought an entire audience to tears at the CMA Awards. The man behind the microphone wasn't just singing about heartbreak, he was living it. Vern Gosdin had just lost everything: his marriage, his record deal, and nearly his will to continue. But that night, as he performed Chiseled in Stone, something extraordinary happened. The song that almost never made it to radio became the CMA Song of the Year. And the man they called The Voice proved why he earned that nickname. The story of Vern Gosdin isn't just about music. It's about a man who turned his darkest moments into country gold. From singing in Alabama cotton fields to becoming one of Nashville's most respected voices, Gosdin's journey would make even the strongest person break. But here's the real question. How did a sharecropper's son with a golden voice end up influencing country music while fighting battles that would eventually silence him forever? The year was 1934, and in the small town of Woodland, Alabama, another mouth to feed arrived at the Gosdin household. Vern Gosdin was born into a world where cotton was king and music was salvation. Every Sunday, the Gosdin family would gather at the local church, their voices rising above the humble wooden pews. Young Vern, alongside his brothers, learned the power of harmony long before he understood the weight of hardship. Life on a cotton farm meant endless days under the scorching Alabama sun. But as Vern's calloused hands picked cotton, his voice soared. The Gosdin family wasn't just working the fields, they were rehearsing. By age 6, Vern was already performing on Birmingham's WVOK radio with his brothers, their gospel harmonies catching the attention of anyone within radio range. The Gosdins weren't just any singing family. They developed a style that blended the raw emotion of gospel with the grit of Southern living. Young Vern absorbed every note, every harmony, every subtle vocal inflection. While other kids dreamed of escaping the cotton fields for the baseball diamond, Vern dreamed in melodies. But Alabama in the 1950s could only offer so much to a young man with music in his blood. As the cotton industry began to decline, Vern made a decision that would alter the course of his life forever. In 1961, with nothing but determination and that golden voice, he packed his bags for California. The West Coast was a different world. While Nashville was keeping country music traditional, California was experimenting. Vern and his brother Rex formed the Gosdin Brothers, finding themselves in the midst of a musical revolution. They weren't just singing gospel anymore. They were blending country with rock, folk with bluegrass, creating something entirely new. It was in California that Vern crossed paths with Gene Clark, former member of the Byrds. Together, they created music that pushed boundaries, earning the Gosdin brothers opening spots for the likes of Merle Haggard and Tammy Wynette. Their song Hangin' On became more than just a regional hit. It was a sign of things to come. But even as the California sun shone bright, Vern felt the pull of traditional country music. He spent his days working at a glass company, but his nights were devoted to developing the voice that would later earn him his legendary nickname. Every heartache, every moment of doubt, every struggle shaped his vocal style into something that couldn't be taught. It had to be lived. Those early years, split between manual labor and music, planted the seeds for what would become one of country music's most distinctive voices. As the 1960s drew to a close, Vern Gosdin stood at a crossroads. The California scene was changing and Nashville was calling. What he didn't know was that Music City had plans for the voice. Plans that would both make and break him in ways he never imagined. Nashville in the 1970s was a city in transition. The polished country-politan sound was fading, and a new wave of traditionalists was emerging. When Vern Gosdin arrived with his worn guitar case and years of experience, Music Row didn't know what to make of him. He was a newcomer with veteran's eyes, and a voice that made even George Jones take notice. But Nashville wasn't going to just hand over the keys to stardom. For years, Vern played the dimly lit corners of every honky-tonk that would have him. What these bar owners didn't realize was that they were witnessing the birth of something special. While disco was dominating the airwaves, Vern was quietly perfecting a sound that would help save traditional country music. Though the price he'd pay for this dedication would nearly cost him everything. The struggle to break through wasn't just about getting noticed. Vern was competing against a new generation of country stars who had youth on their side. But what he lacked in youth, he made up for in experience. Every rejection, every empty tip jar, every long night driving between gigs, it all fed into a voice that carried the weight of real-life experience. In 1976, everything changed. A song called Till the End made its way onto country radio. Industry insiders immediately sat up and took notice. This wasn't just another country singer. This was a vocalist who could make listeners feel every word, every emotion, every heartbeat of a song. The phones at radio stations started ringing. Who was this guy? Where had he been hiding? What they didn't know was that Vern had been preparing for this moment since those early days in the cotton field. Set him up, Joe became more than just another hit. It became Vern's signature calling card. Every night in bars across America, someone would request it, and every time, the jukebox would deliver that unmistakable voice. The song wasn't just a tribute to Ernest Tubb. It was Vern's way of bridging country music's past with its present. He understood the heritage he was carrying forward, even as he carved out his own unique place in country music history. The 1980s brought a string of hits that read like chapters in a novel of heartbreak. If you're gonna do me wrong, do it right. Today my world slipped away, and is it raining at your house? Each song seemed to dig deeper into the well of emotion that Vern had been filling since childhood. These weren't just country songs. They were 3-minute documentaries of the human heart, delivered by a voice that understood every nuance of pain and redemption. Record labels started paying attention in a big way. Columbia Records signed him, seeing in Vern something that had become rare in Nashville: authenticity that couldn't be manufactured. His albums weren't just collections of songs. They were masterclasses in country vocals. Young singers would stand in the back of his concerts, studying how he could take a simple phrase and infuse it with so much meaning. By 1988, Vern had earned his nickname, The Voice. But the story behind that title involves one of country music's most revered legends, and we'll get to that shortly. The nickname wasn't just about his technical ability. It was about his power to connect with listeners on a soul-deep level. When Vern sang about heartbreak, you didn't just hear it, you felt it in your bones. What happened next would not only define Vern's legacy, but would also create one of country music's most heart-wrenching moments. A performance so raw that hardened music executives had to turn away to hide their tears. And it all started with a phone call that Vern never wanted to receive. That phone call came on a Tuesday morning in early 1989. Vern's marriage was falling apart, and his record label was getting nervous about his increasingly personal songwriting. But as he sat in his home studio, staring at a half-written song that would soon become chiseled in stone, he had no idea he was about to create the most important record of his career. The pain of divorce wasn't just affecting Vern's personal life, it was seeping into every note he sang. Studio sessions became emotional battlegrounds where Vern would often need to step outside to compose himself. But something remarkable was happening. The rawer his emotions got, the more powerful his performances became. Engineers would later admit they had to turn down the microphone's sensitivity because his voice carried so much natural intensity. Record executives at Columbia were unsure about releasing such nakedly emotional material. Country music in the late 1980s was moving toward a more polished, commercial sound. Artists like Randy Travis and George Strait were dominating the charts with their own brand of traditional country. But what Vern was creating was something different. It was almost too real, too painful to be commercial. The album that emerged from these sessions, alone and emotionally raw, showcased Vern at his most vulnerable. Songs like I'm Still Crazy and Almost Called Her Name Again weren't just tracks on an album. They were pages torn from his personal diary. His voice had always carried weight, but now it carried wisdom that could only come from walking through fire. Max D. Barnes, who would become one of Vern's most important collaborators, saw something in these vulnerable recordings that others missed. Together, they crafted songs that didn't just tell stories, they exposed the human heart in all its fragile glory. Chiseled in Stone wasn't just another song about loss, it was a testament to every person who'd ever had to learn to live with an unchangeable past. The recording session for Chiseled in Stone became legendary in Nashville circles. Vern insisted on keeping the lights low, and the studio band later reported that they could barely see their instruments, but they could hear him. One take was all it took, a performance so genuine that the producer didn't dare suggest a second attempt. You can still hear Vern's voice crack slightly in the final chorus, a moment of humanity that no amount of studio polish could improve. When the song hit radio, something unprecedented happened. Stations weren't just playing it, they were playing it twice in a row because listeners kept calling in, overwhelmed by what they'd heard. In an era before viral videos and social media, Chiseled in Stone spread through pure emotional connection. It wasn't just country fans who were affected. Rock stations started playing it, proving that genuine pain knows no genre boundaries. But success came with a price. The more Vern poured his personal life into his music, the harder it became to maintain any sense of privacy. Every performance of Chiseled in Stone required him to relive the worst moments of his life. Yet night after night, he delivered it with the same raw intensity. As one band member put it, Vern didn't perform that song, he survived it every time he sang it. Behind the scenes, the toll was mounting. While radio was playing his songs in heavy rotation, Vern was grappling with the reality that his most significant commercial success was built on his deepest personal failures. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd finally achieved the recognition he'd spent decades pursuing, but the cost was almost unbearable. The CMA Awards were approaching, and Vern was nominated for Song of the Year. But what the audience would witness that night wasn't just a performance. It was a man laying his soul bare on national television. And the aftermath would reveal just how much that level of emotional honesty could cost a person. The 1989 CMA Awards should have been Vern Gosdin's crowning moment. As he stood backstage at the Grand Ole Opry House, clutching the lyrics to Chiseled in Stone, industry insiders could see something was different about him. His hands were shaking, but his voice, that voice that had carried him from Alabama cotton fields to this very stage, remained steady. The spotlights hit him as he walked out to perform. What happened next became one of country music's most talked about moments. Vern didn't just sing Chiseled in Stone. He channeled every ounce of pain, every sleepless night, every moment of regret into 3 minutes of raw emotion. The cameras caught several audience members wiping away tears. Even the orchestra members, who'd seen countless performances on that stage, stopped to watch. When Vern won Song of the Year that night, his acceptance speech was brief. Those who knew him best understood why. He was living in a cruel paradox where his greatest professional triumph was inextricably linked to his deepest personal pain. The golden trophy felt heavy in his hands for reasons that went far beyond its physical weight. The aftermath of that night was complicated. Radio stations couldn't get enough of Vern's music, but the demands of success were crushing him. Every interview wanted to dig deeper into his personal pain. Every performance required him to revisit his darkest moments. The emotional toll began to show in subtle ways. Missed rehearsals, canceled appearances, and a growing distance from the industry that had finally embraced him. But the story wasn't over. Just as Vern reached his commercial peak, the country music landscape began to shift dramatically. The early 1990s brought a new wave of young stars with polished sounds and marketable images. While George Strait and Alan Jackson managed to bridge the gap between traditional and modern country, Vern found himself increasingly out of step with the changing times. Financial troubles began to mount. The divorce that had inspired his greatest hits had also drained his resources. Concert bookings became scarcer as radio stations focused on newer artists. The voice that had earned him his nickname remained as powerful as ever, but the industry was looking elsewhere. He began selling off possessions to keep afloat: guitars, stage clothes, even his cherished record collection. Health issues started creeping in too. Years of touring, late nights, and emotional strain had taken their toll. His voice, while still remarkable, required more rest between shows. Some nights he'd sit alone in his tour bus, listening to playbacks of his old recordings, wondering if he'd given too much of himself to the music. The stories about his struggles started circulating through Nashville. Friends and fellow artists tried to help, but Vern's pride made it difficult for him to accept assistance. He'd built his career on raw honesty, and now that same quality made it impossible for him to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Yet even in these difficult times, Vern's influence on country music was undeniable. Young artists would seek him out, hoping to learn the secrets behind his emotional delivery. What they found was a man who couldn't separate the artist from the art. Every song was a piece of his soul, every performance a testimony of lived experience. Despite the hardships, Vern continued to record when he could. These later sessions took on an almost mythical quality among studio musicians. They spoke of a man who, despite everything life had thrown at him, could still silence a room with just his voice. One producer noted that even with all the advanced recording technology available, nothing could capture the pure emotion Vern brought to every take. The true cost of Vern's dedication to emotional authenticity became clear during a particularly poignant moment in 1993. After finishing a heart-wrenching take of a new song, he collapsed in the studio. The paramedics came, but Vern refused to leave until he'd completed the session. It was a perfect metaphor for his career, a man literally giving everything he had to the music, even as his body was telling him to stop. The new generation of country stars watched and learned from Vern's situation. They saw both the power of emotional authenticity and the price it could exact. As one prominent artist of the era noted, Vern didn't just show us how to sing, he showed us what it costs to be real in this business. But just when everyone thought Vern Gosdin's story was reaching its final chapter, something remarkable happened in a small studio on Music Row. The session that followed would not only remind Nashville why they called him the Voice, but would also reveal a side of Vern Gosdin that nobody had seen before. That small studio session in 1994 wasn't meant to be anything special. Vern had agreed to record a few songs for a tribute album, a favor for an old friend. Nobody expected what happened when he stepped up to the microphone that day. His voice, weathered by time and trouble, had somehow grown richer, deeper, more authentic. The song was There Must Be a Someone, an old Ernest Tubb number. But Vern didn't just cover it, he transformed it. The studio fell silent as he delivered a performance that seemed to channel every triumph and tragedy of his life. When he finished, the producer couldn't speak. The tape kept rolling, catching the sound of hardened studio veterans sniffling in the background. These moments of pure magic weren't rare in Vern's career. They were the foundation of it. Take Is It Raining at Your House, a song that became more than just another track on country radio. Written with Eddie Rabbitt and Buddy Cannon, the song captured something universal about loneliness and regret. But it was Vern's delivery that turned it into what many consider one of country music's perfect recordings. The story behind Chiseled and Stone went deeper than most fans knew. Vern had initially resisted recording it, feeling the lyrics cut too close to home. Max D. Barnes, his co-writer, had to convince him that sometimes the songs that hurt the most to sing are the ones people need to hear. The session was delayed 3 times because Vern couldn't make it through a complete take without breaking down. Each of Vern's hits carried similar weight. Today, My World Slipped Away wasn't just another broken heart song. It was written after Vern received news that would change his life forever. If You're Gonna Do Me Wrong, Do It Right came from a late-night conversation with George Jones about their parallel struggles. Every song was a chapter in a life lived without emotional shortcuts. His approach to recording was equally genuine. While other artists might spend days perfecting a vocal track, Vern usually nailed it in 1 or 2 takes. As one engineer put it, he wasn't performing songs, he was living them in real time. The raw emotion in his voice wasn't something that could be manufactured or enhanced in post-production. The music industry began to shift toward a more polished sound in the mid-1990s, but Vern refused to change his approach. He turned down songs that didn't speak to his experience, even when they were guaranteed hits. His philosophy was simple. If he couldn't feel it, he couldn't sing it. This dedication to authenticity cost him commercially but earned him something more valuable: respect from his peers and unwavering loyalty from his fans. In Nashville, where image often trumps substance, Vern remained a testament to the power of emotional truth. Young artists would study his phrasing, trying to understand how he could make a simple word carry so much meaning. But as one veteran producer observed, you can't learn what Vern does, you have to live it. As the century drew to a close, Vern faced his greatest challenge yet. The voice that had carried him through decades of ups and downs was about to face its toughest test, and what happened next would leave an indelible mark on country music history. 1999 was supposed to be a year of celebration for country music. The genre had exploded globally, crossing boundaries and breaking records. But in a small Nashville hospital room, Vern Gosdin was fighting a different kind of battle. A series of strokes had left him weakened, yet he insisted on trying to sing every day, even if just for a few minutes. The man who had turned personal pain into musical gold was facing his own mortality with the same raw honesty that had defined his career. Friends who visited were struck by his determination. Even when doctors advised him to rest his voice, Vern would hum melodies, new songs that he feared might never make it to tape. His last major recording session in 2000 became the stuff of Nashville legend. Unable to stand for long periods, Vern insisted on recording seated in a comfortable old chair he'd brought from home. The engineers had to reconfigure the entire studio around him. But when the red light came on, something extraordinary happened. The voice soared one last time. The resulting album, Out of This World, wasn't just another collection of songs. It was Vern's final testament, a document of a man singing with the knowledge that each note could be his last. The title track, in particular, showcased a voice that, while physically diminished, had somehow grown in emotional power. What few people knew was that during these final recording sessions, Vern was also secretly working on an autobiography. Pages of handwritten memories detailed everything from his childhood in Alabama to his thoughts on modern country music. The manuscript, never published, revealed a man who understood exactly what his journey had cost him and why it had been worth every painful step. Those late-night writing sessions in his hospital room produced something else too, a collection of unrecorded songs that spoke to his condition. One particular tune, discovered after his passing, included the haunting line, "When the voice fails the singer, the heart keeps the melody." It was as if he knew his legacy would extend far beyond his physical presence. As his health continued to decline, Vern spent more time at his small farm outside Nashville. He'd sit on his porch watching the sunset, occasionally picking up his guitar to work out new melodies. Visitors reported that he seemed at peace, even as his ability to perform gradually slipped away. "I've said what I needed to say," he told one friend, "and I said it my way." Those who knew him during these final years saw a different side of the voice. The man who had sung so powerfully about life's hardships had found a quiet dignity in facing his own mortality. He spent hours mentoring young singers, not teaching them how to sing, but how to mean what they sang. In early 2009, despite his weakened condition, Vern made one final appearance at the Grand Ole Opry. He didn't sing, he couldn't by then, but his mere presence brought the audience to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. It was as if everyone in that historic venue understood they were witnessing the end of an era. On April 28, 2009, the news spread through Nashville like a somber wave. Vern Gosdin had sung his last song. The tributes poured in from around the world, but perhaps the most telling came from George Jones, who simply said, "The world lost half its heart today." Keith Whitley's widow, Lori Morgan, added, "There will never be another voice that can touch the heart like Vern's." But the story of the voice wasn't over. In fact, what happened after Vern's passing would prove just how deeply his influence had penetrated the heart of country music and how a cotton farmer's son from Alabama had changed the genre forever. When modern country stars talk about their influences, one name keeps surfacing in unexpected ways. Chris Stapleton, known for his own powerful vocals, credited Gosdin in his 2015 CMA acceptance speech. Tyler Childers has been known to cover Chiseled in Stone in his live shows, introducing it to a whole new generation. Even outside traditional country circles, Vern's influence resonates. You can hear echoes of his emotional delivery in artists from rock to Americana. But Vern Gosdin's true legacy isn't just in who covers his songs or praises his name. It's in how he changed the way country music approaches emotion. Before Vern, country singers performed heartbreak. After him, they had to live it. Every artist who steps into a studio today knows the bar Vern set. Authenticity isn't just preferred, it's required. His catalog continues to surprise new listeners. Songs like That Just About Does It and Right in the Wrong Direction reveal new layers of meaning with each listen. Music critics regularly cite his work as the gold standard for emotional delivery in country music. What's remarkable is how contemporary these decades-old recordings sound. Pain, it seems, never goes out of style. Perhaps that's the most fitting tribute to the man they called The Voice. Decades after his passing, he's still teaching us that in country music, as in life, there are no shortcuts to authenticity. From those Alabama cotton fields to the heights of country stardom, Vern Gosdin's journey reminds us that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that speaks straight from the heart. Next time, we'll explore another country legend whose rise to fame came at an even steeper price.